So, good morning, students. Students, welcome to this particular session. Let's then start with this discussion. So, students, up till the earlier lecture, as a matter of a quick revision, the discussion that we all had. Again, I can just do a quick recap. So, let's get started with this. Tax liability was the entire focus area because the chargeability was on the total income which is to be assessed or computed in the manner which is laid down under the Act. The assessment of this total income would be done in the respective assessment year, and that would be as per the law of as on the 1st April of the relevant AY. So, in respect of the law which is enforceable as on the 1st of the April of the relevant AY, on that particular basis, the entire computation shall be made. Computation, therefore, would be in respect of a tax liability being a function of two factors, and the tax liability is a function of two factors, and namely they are total income and second one is the rate of tax. So far as the rate of tax is concerned, students, we have got the two sources of the rate of tax. One is the IT Act 1961 and another is the Finance Act 2020. And we have already seen that IT Act provides us the special rate of tax to be applied upon the special income. Special rate of tax to be applied upon the special income. That is what the IT Act will be doing. And so far as the Income Tax Act is concerned, we have seen that the Income Tax Act, the rate which is given in the Finance Act is concerned, the rate which is given in the Finance Act is concerned is in respect of the person. So therefore, students, in that context, the balance total income, from the total income you will minus the special income, because for that already you have put forth the special rate of tax, and thereafter whatever is the balance total income, on that balance total income the rate which is as per the Finance Act 2020 which is applicable for the person would be enforced, would be applied. One point which I have already told you about, that alternate scheme of taxation, students, and this was the most important observation that we had in our last lecture also, that now we are into the era of an alternate tax scheme, as per which, what does this alternate tax scheme do, students? As per the alternate tax scheme, what you will allowed to now obtain the benefit of the reduced rate of tax, a reduced rate of tax to be applied on the total income, which will be computed by foregoing the major deductions and the major incentives. So once you forego those major deductions and major incentives, on that basis whatever is the total income that will be computed, that total income will be what? That total income will be charged to the reduced rate of tax. Now, one thing I have already told you, again I am repeating this thing again and again, that if at all in this total income which has been computed after foregoing the major deductions or the tax incentives, the total income which you have so computed, if in that there is a special income like long-term capital gains, lottery winning, etc., so the special income will continue to be charged at the special rate of tax, and the balance total income will then be charged to this alternate scheme of the reduced rate of tax. So this is one thing which has been there, students. Now please be aware of this point. Why students, just take a pause and just try. I'll just tell you one particular important point. We are in this the third lecture or so, and from the first lecture itself I have set you up for my theme, the theme of the entire this batch for AY 21-22, applicable for May 21 and November 21 attempt. I've already have set up the theme of my first class, and the theme is majorly the entire regime would be, students, on this new scheme of the alternate tax scheme. What this alternate tax scheme would hold upon, because I'm telling you, the moment you all will, after your examination gets over and thereafter in the assessment year 21-22, once you start joining your offices and all, you will find this is a major consideration that will be given at that time when you start filing your client return at that stage. So you will be majorly looking into whether they should opt for the alternate tax scheme or they should continue with the existing scheme. This is what would be the kind of the calculation that you all will be getting into it. Because up till now, till last AY, it was only applicable for the company. But now hereinafter, it has now been made applicable to each and every person primarily, and that is the reason why this sort of a calculation each one of you will have to engage, and that is the reason why this has to be the theme of this particular batch. So what I would be doing it over a period of time, like every lecture, something or the other, you will find that I am discussing something about the alternate tax scheme, so that once this chapter gets unfolded, at that stage already the base material is there in your mind, and then we will hit upon the specific calculation part, whatever, how the calculation has to be done. But the base I will build up lecture by lecture, series after series, as far as this very important, the era that we all are entering with effect from AY 21-22. And this is going to be the way forward, the journey forward in the entire income tax law. And that is the reason why, students, this kind of a discussion will be one of the most important one, Naveen, and that is one thing which I'll keep on hammering in my all the lectures, which you will find that bit and pieces, you'll find this discussion going around. So students, that was all about the tax rates. That is all about the tax rate that we have discussed. Now the next particular part, which is about what? The total income. In fact, I'll tell you, students, like my last particular batch, which was for Finance Act 2019, if you see, the theme was different. Here the theme will be different. So herein you will know that all the alignment of my theme in my lecture right from the start of the class would be in respect of, you'll find it would be in respect of this new era that we all have entered into it. We will do, in fact, lot of practical problem also in this particular, the new alternate tax scheme as well. Lot of problems has been designed for all of you, and that you will get the hold of it. But before getting the hold of the practical, the base material will be discussed lecture after lecture, primarily in small and bits and pieces. Primarily we will have the capsule discussion of this particular alternate tax scheme in every class. Let's come to this particular total income side. Students, what the discussion that we had in total income? First of all, is this total income defined? And the answer is yes. The total income has been defined, although the definition was in an exhaustive manner. The definition of total income was been done in an exhaustive manner. Why is it so? In the section 2 clause 45, the total income so defined, it means. So what it means? So they say that it means an income which is what? Which is referred in section 5, and that will fetch you what? The qualified income, and that qualified income will then be computed in the manner laid down under the Act. So therefore, what is required for all of us is the existence of an income. That income, as we have concluded up till now, is nothing but the revenue receipt and the specified capital receipts. That income that we have computed, that we have discussed, is nothing but the revenue receipt. A revenue receipt means an amount which arises from a definite source. That becomes nothing but the revenue receipt. So any amount which arises from a definite source will then be considered to be a revenue receipt. And as we all have discussed, to expand the tax base, that we find that specified capital receipt, which otherwise is not an income, has been defined as an income under the Act for the purpose of attracting the chargeability in respect of the same. Specified capital receipt has been defined under the Act as an income so as to attract the chargeability in respect of the same. So that is what will be the income which will be subject matter of charge under the Act. Not only that, we also have to ensure that this income should also fall within the scope of Section 5, and Section 5, as we have discussed in the last lecture, also provides the territorial nexus or the territorial jurisdiction. The scope of that total income will be chargeable to tax under the Act. That will depend upon the residential status of the person. Whereas if the person happens to be a resident of under the Act, then directly the nexus has been established with the person, and therefore irrespective of where he earns the income, the entire earnings will be subject to charge under the Act. Why is it so? Because the nexus is directly with the person being a resident under the Act. Whereas if that person happens to be a non-resident, then the nexus is not with the person, then the nexus needs to be established with his income. And accordingly, students, what we have said was that if his income, primarily what we have discussed was, if his income is either have accrued or deemed to have accrued or arise in India, or the income of this non-resident has been received by him in India, then we can say and conclude that the nexus is established so far as the Act is concerned in respect of the income of the non-resident, in respect of these income of the non-resident, and accordingly on these incomes, which income accrued in India or received in India, on these income the chargeability would be attracted, and that will finally give rise to my qualified income. That will finally fetch us what? The qualified income, and only in respect of this qualified income that I am going to go further down to do the computation in the manner laid down under the Act. And that is the reason why in the last lecture, students, if you recall, I have provided you a format of the computation of the total income, particulars, amount, and in that particular format of the computation of total income, what is that we have discussed? That the statement that you have prepared for computation of total income, in that particular statement you are going to reflect only that income which is essentially a qualified income, So therefore you have to be very, very careful about the fact that what you are choosing to be a part and parcel of the chargeability is nothing but the qualified income. So that is one particular point that you all have to in fact take into account, students. Be very, very careful about the same. So this is what we have discussed so far, primarily, that the qualified income has to be determined, and that qualified income will then be computed in the manner laid down under the Act. So now we come to our point number 3, and this is the discussion, students, that we are going to now discuss henceforth further. Okay. Parth, Nishil, good morning to all of you. So let's start, students, in this context. In this particular context, students, the total income. So as we have discussed that income referred in Section 5, this will give you the qualified income, and in respect of the same we are supposed to do the Computation in the manner laid down under the Act. Computation laid down in the manner under the Act. Good morning, Sohail. So, in this regard, students, when we are doing the computation part, in the last lecture, I had given you a sort of a distinction, or the kind of a distinction in the last lecture that we have learned was in respect of the direct and the indirect taxes. The distinction that we have learned was in respect of the direct and indirect taxes. That was in the basis of the territorial nexus. Whereas in the case of the indirect taxes, the nexus is established on the basis of the place of the consumption of the goods and services. So, the place where the goods and services are consumed, it is that particular place will have the authority to create or to levy the charge of the GST, of the IDT. So, the place of consumption the place of consumption is made as the basis of creating the charge. As far as a direct tax was concerned, being a tax on the total income of the person, therefore where the income is earned becomes a secondary point. Who has earned the income becomes the primary focus. This is where the distinction was being highlighted upon in my previous lecture between the DT and the IDT. So the distinction was essentially, students, again I am repeating this, the distinction was essentially on the territorial nexus, or to create or to define the scope of the taxable event. So what is a taxable event that will be charged under the respective act? That is distinct both in the context of direct tax whereas in the context of indirect tax. Now today, students, I am going to I'll ask you a question whereby you need to answer me, students, this point. Be very careful. When I do the computation part, now we will try to focus upon what is the distinction between what? Between the direct tax and the accounting income. Income as per the income tax law and the income as per the accounting law, students. What is there any fundamental difference between the two? An income which is computed under the income tax law versus the income which is computed under the Companies Act. What is the difference between the two? All of you students, now you will try to give me this answer. Even the pen drive students who are there, G drive students, you will try to get the answer in your mind. Others live batch students, you will try to type this answer and let me know. And then after, I'll just try to see what is your answer, and on that basis I'll try to give my reply. Get started, students. I've asked you what is the distinction between the accounting income versus the income which is computed under the Act. Give me quickly the answer between the two. Accounting income versus the income which is computed under the Act. Fast. So the distinction between the two is in respect of the accounting income, the income is not computed in form of a distinct heads of income. The income is not computed in terms of the distinct heads of income, unlike in the case of the income tax total income. This is where, students, you will find the major difference between the two. Whereas in the case of the accounting income, there is no specific heads which has been created when you do the accounting income. So it's nothing but a consolidation of all the income, and on that basis we are preparing our net profit as per the Companies Act. But when it comes down to the income tax law, students, this is where the distinction will lie. Here the computation is not done on a consolidated basis. The computation under the income tax law is carried out for each and every head separately and distinctively. So in all we have got 5 heads of income, and for each heads of income primarily there is a distinct mode of computation against each other. And that is the reason why, students, that is the reason why when you talk about the computation part, the first and the most important point to be discussed is what? Is how to classify the income into the appropriate heads of income. The very first step, students, herein, the very first step in the context of the computation under the Act. So it will go into 2 steps primarily. The very first step to be discussed in this context is the classification of the income into the appropriate head. So the income will be classified into the appropriate heads of income, and as I told you, there are 5 heads of income, and based on that particular thing, students, first and the foremost thing will arise is about what? The classification of the income into the appropriate head. Why classification? Now you have already have known, and I have already have told you why classification is necessary. Classification, students, is necessary because each and every heads of income, if you would have noticed, each and every heads of income has got a distinct or a unique mode of computation of the income in that particular head. As we go through, these are 5 heads, and if you see the fingers, each of the finger are not the same, isn't it? So it's just like the 5 fingers, and each of the finger in the hand, they are not the same. The same is also with the case of the total income, the heads of income, 5 heads of income. Now starting with the first head is what? The salary. This is a unique thing, students, or maybe it's a coincidence. The way we look into the fingers in our hand, it's actually the same way. It is actually the same way in which the 5 heads of income are also have the same sort of a stature. Let's start with the first head, the salary. Student, this head is the head which we can say suffers the most. The first head of income, which is the salary, this is the head which actually suffers the most. You'll say, sir, why is it so? Why you say so? The reason is quite clear, students, here. It does not get any sort of deduction whatsoever. You would have been aware of this particular fact, that this particular salary as a head does not have any sort of substantial deduction whatsoever. In fact, last year or last to last year, they have introduced or reintroduced the concept of standard deduction. First it was 40 and now it has been announced to 50,000. So that is the kind of a standard deduction that we all get under the head salary. But then just imagine one thing, students. How much is a standard deduction? It is a flat amount, and that flat amount is 50,000. And then there is a P-tax deduction also, professional tax deduction also, which is again a peanut amount. And there is one more deduction in section 16, which is about for entertainment allowance, but that is applicable for whom? For the government employee, and that too for a particular backdated period. So hardly there are anything in the form of a deduction. Just imagine one particular thing. A person who actually will end up in the employment, and he only continues to be in the employment, what happens for that particular person? Like, you will be into the employment, say initially, and when you join the company, you join at a package of say rupees 6 lakhs per annum. At that point of time also, your deduction, standard deduction, would always be 50,000 rupees flat. that time also your standard deduction would be rupees 50,000 flat. Thereafter, students, once you grow in the stature and the position in the company, and maybe say for example after so many years of the experience, you actually draw a salary of say rupees 1 crore. At that point of time as well, your standard deduction in the present law, as per the present law, will remain at rupees 50,000. At that stage, you will feel the pinch of it. There, that is to say, a standard deduction, equal deduction is given to two unequals. Equal deduction has been given to whom? To two unequals. Two unequals in what sense? Whereas a person drawing a salary of 6 lakhs versus a person drawing a salary of rupees 1 crore, both of them being unequal in terms of their compensation that they draw from the company, both of them however gets the same amount of standard deduction of rupees 50,000. What else that you get in this particular head, students? You are getting primarily after this head, there what is that you are going to study in salary. After that, apart from this, you get only in the form of an exemptions. You get what, students? You get only the exemptions. So there are certain exemptions which are being provided to you. The exemptions are majorly on the retirement benefits which you draw, like leave encashment, like gratuity, pension, provident fund. There are certain exemptions which are being put forth. On that, the government is very selective in terms of taxing that particular side of your income under the head salary. Taxing that particular side of the income under the head salary. So government becomes selective, and that is the reason why they are providing you what? They are providing you the exemption. That is more to give you a kind of a security towards your post-retirement basis. So they are taxing you less when you don't earn, taxing you more when you are in your earning stage. That's the reason why when you are in fact get a regular earnings, at that stage you are not been getting any sort of an exemption. Yes, there are certain allowances, students, which you also get. On that there are certain exemption, but the exemption on the allowances are, students, very hopeless. Like for example, you all are aware of the fact under the head salary that some children education allowance. Remember those good days of your IPCC? Children education allowance, hostel allowances. The kind of the amount that you are reading in 2020, 2021 and maybe years thereafter, the amount will remain the same. Because when I read it for the first time in my IPCC, somewhere late in 90s, 99, it was 99 or so, 99, 2000. At that time also the allowance was the same. And we used to feel like the same amount which is there, 100 rupees per month per child, maximum 2. We used to compare with our stipend, because our stipend was relatively bit higher, 300 rupees per month. So that time we used to compare with our stipend. Okay, it is not very, anyway, it is not that this thing, it is comparable to our stipend itself. Then we thought that, but 100 rupees, that time also we used to feel it like it is so much of the less amount that the exemptions are being given. I checked out with my boss that look, this particular, in today's time, this 100 rupees per month per child subject to maximum 2, this looks to be ridiculous amount. He said that don't worry, even I have studied the same thing. So he was a batch of 80s. So 81, 82 batch, my boss, he also studied the same thing. Then I realized that this particular limit of 100 rupees, 50 rupees for something, so those are the limits which were there right from day one, 1961. When the law was being introduced, and they have given disregard to the inflationary tendency. Good morning, Dharmesh. They have disregarded the inflationary tendency on this. The inflationary tendency, students, you will find that they are accommodating only in one head, which is that head, capital gains. But when it comes to the salary, the exemption limit that we find in the allowances, you will find that all that you are studying now has remained static right from day one. All you are studying today in 2020 has remained static, has remained constant right from day one. So this is what this head is to offer to you. This therefore head is the head, students, which suffers the most, because it hardly has any deduction, and the deduction that you all get is regressive. And whatever is a little bit of an exemption that you actually get substantially, those exemptions are towards the retirement side. Towards the retirement benefits which you draw under this head. For that, the exemptions are being provided in a substantial manner. Other than that, this head primarily will not offer you much in terms of the savings or tax planning. Now students, this particular chapter also we are going to do it. In fact, salary topic, house property, also all the basic topic of your IPCC as well, we are going to do it. This would be done in your last module, module number 5. Because the way we are going to address this topic would be a bit in a unique manner, because we are going to merge this topic with like chapter 6a. Like for salary, what kind of, for a person who is earning a salary, what sort of a tax planning that he can do? What sort of a tax planning that he can do? He can do, or he can resort, students, for a tax planning which is in the form of what? The tax planning that he can do primarily is in the form of ATC and all. ATC, ATD, all these are the limited particular tax planning method which is available for a salaried employee. And that is what it is. So he, or else primarily what happens is that he, a salary particular employee, he will earn some income, and that, or he will do some investment, and that investment will fetch a return, and that return will go under the head IFOS. So his entire life, students, if you see his entire life on the salary, first head and the last head, one is the salary as the head and another is the IFOS, and within these income he will try to get some chapter 6A deduction. Now somebody in that particular head also think of house property as well, but like Pradhan Mantri Awas Kalyan Yojana, whereby a limited like 25 to 45 lakhs. So therefore then they get into one more head, and that head then becomes the head house property, wherein they take a loan primarily for the purpose of buying that house property, and that loan further will fetch them the deduction one in the head house property. And there is also a chapter 6A that we will do. In that also there is some sort of lineage of the loan which is taken for the affordable housing scheme. For that particular loan, there are some extra deduction of interest which you get it under the chapter 6A particular part. That we will discuss it. This is the way we have to discuss the head salary. So students, in final CA, primarily if you do the head salary, you have to primarily make a kind of a case study analysis, and how effectively they can do some sort of a tax planning is what we are supposed to finally look into that particular aspect. So this is what we will engage into, the different sort of a case study for a salaried employee, so as to get a better perspective. Next particular head, as I told you, is a head house property. This is the second head, the head house property. Now if you see, students, here also, like what you get if the income is charged under the head house property, then in that case the GAV, the gross annual value which is there, that GAV will be required to be computed. So you will undertake a computational mechanism as far as your GAV is concerned. You will undertake what? A computational mechanism as far as your GAV is concerned. So you will do that computational mechanism for that particular GAV which is given under that particular section 23. Thereafter, in that head as well, which head I am talking about it, the head house property, also you find what? You all find a concept of standard deduction under the head house property. But the standard deduction of the head house property can be compared with the standard deduction of the head salary, isn't it? Why it can be compared? Both the deduction is standard, but one under the head salary is a fixed amount, whereas another under the head house property will be what? As a percentage of your NAV. And that therefore, at least there is some sort of what? Some sort of comfort level for a person who earns the income under the head house property, that his standard deduction is also progressive. His standard deduction is what? Is also progressive. What do you mean by progressive? As your rental or your GAV is higher, so will be what? So will be your standard deduction. In fact, students, which I told you also, which was we have discussed this. Like, just compare what the example I have given you to the head salary. Just substitute for the head house property. Substitute this with the head house property. And if you substitute this with the head house property, students, then in that house property head, like if I get a GAV of 6 lakhs or NAV of 6 lakhs, then as against 30% standard deduction, it will become 1,80,000. As against 30% standard deduction, it will become 1,80,000. Whereas when you talk about what? Talk about a 1 crore of NAV under the head house property, 1 crore of the NAV under the head house property, your standard deduction will be how much? 30%, which is 30 lakhs. This is precisely the comfort that you get under the head house property, which is not the case when it comes to the head salary. Why? A 6 lakh salary, 50,000 standard deduction, a crore of salary, 50,000 standard deduction. So you should know exactly how the things are moving around it. And accordingly, that is the best way to do your tax planning. So house property, that is the deduction, and thereafter, students, thereafter what? There is one more deduction in the form of the interest on the loan borrowed for the purpose of the purchase or construction of the house property. Even that is one extra deduction that you get, an important deduction under that particular head house property. So therefore you can just see how distinct is the computational mechanism of the income under the head salary versus the income under the head house property. This is a distinct mode of the computation. Now coming to the third head, and this is the biggest one. Which is this third one? The third head, which we talk always as to be the biggest of the entire lot. This is the head PGBP. So when we talk about the head PGBP, students, you would have realized that under this particular head, that is profit and gains from business and profession, under this particular head, here what happens? So students, under the head PGBP, this is the biggest of the head because here is the only head which grants you the deduction on the actual expenses. You are getting the deduction of the actual expenditures. That is the reason why this becomes one of the biggest of the head, both for the academics as well as for practice. Academics, what we are engaging right now ourselves, as well as in the practice also, you will find this would be the biggest of the head. In fact, students, when you involve yourself into the practice, you will come to know that majorly even the tax assessment, when they do the tax assessment are also majorly directed towards whom? Towards the business assessees, the one who is engaged under the head PGBP. Now, just imagine one thing. Why is it that they don't have any sort of complexity under the head salary and under the head house property? The entire computation is quite simple. It's stable without any room for any sort of litigation whatsoever. You would have noticed one more point, students, that hardly there are any case laws, some primarily under the head salary or under the head house property. House property, whatever is the case law which would be there, that will be in respect of the charging section. The charging section, which we'll discuss in our next particular segment. The first discussion would be that case laws that I'm going to discuss with you in our part B of this particular lecture. But the short point which I'm trying to draw upon is that hardly you would have encountered the case laws in the computation. Why? Because of the fact there is no case law, because what you get under these two particular heads, is a standard deduction. And because that you are getting a standard deduction, there is no room of any controversy. The controversy ends over there itself. One is a flat amount, another is as a percentage of your NAV calculation. And even the NAV calculation is very straight. Like there is a expected rent and all calculation that has to be done. So that calculation itself is quite straight enough, wherein there is absolutely no room of any controversy whether the calculation has been done by the SSC or whether the calculation has been done by the department. But what happens is the third head. When it comes to the third head, which is your PGBP, it is this head which creates lot of controversies as well. Why is it so? Because this is the only head wherein the Act allows you to claim the deduction on actual basis. And therefore, irrespective of what is the nature of the expenditure, what is the type of that expenditure, the deduction can be made available to you under the head PGBP if it satisfies what? Satisfy the condition laid down in that section. Like students, if you remember, there was section 37(1). There was this section 37(1), which is a general deduction under the head PGBP. And what it used to say? It used to say that any expenditure which is wholly and exclusively for the purpose of business and profession, that will be allowed to you as deduction. I'm just telling you a bit part of this section. There are other things as well, but just right now for the discussion purpose. So what is the scenario here is that any expenditure can qualify for the purpose of deduction provided it is exclusively for the purpose of business and profession. So therefore, there is no such thing about that naming a particular expenditure. Any expenditure will qualify, only you satisfy the condition. And what is the condition that you need to satisfy? It should be for the purpose of business and profession. So this is where the list of primarily of the expenditure for which you want to take the deduction, the list becomes infinite. And that is why the tax assessment, when it happens from the end of the department, they will pick up the case for scrutiny. They will pick up the case for scrutiny. Do you think they will pick up the case for scrutiny for a salary employee or for a person who is under the head house property? Will they pick it for the scrutiny? And the answer is no, unless and until there are certain errors in the computation under these two heads. And that is what they will then try to intimate, that error in the computation which the assessee would have done so far as these two heads are concerned. But the real verification of the kind of deduction that the assessee has claimed is done under the head PGBP. That is what the tax assessment, when the assessing officer will look into it, he will try to focus upon the fact that whether this particular expenditure which the assessee is claiming as a deduction, does it satisfy the condition which is laid down in the respective section under the head PGBP, in the respective section which is laid down under the head PGBP. This is what actually happens. And therefore you will find, students, suddenly when we start doing PGBP, there are plethora of case laws. At that time you should have the ability to stretch your mind. Why is it that there are many case law? This is the reason why there is many case law, which I have just now spoken to you all about it. That is the head wherein you will find many case law, because the deduction here is based on the fulfillment of the conditions. Repeat with me, students, repeat with me what I've said. Under the head PGBP, you will find the deductions which are given under this head. Which head? PGBP is based on the fulfillment of the conditions. Fulfill the conditions, take the deduction. That is what this head PGBP will be all about, and that is why my first topic which I'm going to kick off would be PGBP. That is what I told you, how smartly we have designed our entire curriculum. That salary, house property, module number 5. What we are going to do, provisions would be given in brief, but majorly on the case study, like all that combinations. You learn the combination because there is hardly any controversy. So what is the method of doing salary and house property and chapter 6A IPCC stuff? Primarily, it's all about putting the lot of combinations in this kind of a scenario. So do the combination and get yourself competent in this particular entire topics. But the major focus, students, will be required to get a real hands-on on what? On the biggest topic of the entire income tax law, which happens to be PGBP. Because here you will learn with me, as I'll proceed further, you will learn how we link it up with the ICDS as well. So we are going to link it up with the ICDS, and that exactly how we are going to take it forward, students. So that is what the way the PGBP discussion, we are going to stretch it up in our particular entire discussion. So this is my first topic, but before the first topic, primarily when we start, we will have the background discussion which we are having it right now, so that the base and the foundation before you enter a topic is already set very clearly. The rules of the game is set very clearly. This is the approach that every one of us will be following it up. So students, this is what this head PGBP is going to offer. As I was telling you, my 5 finger, first finger, small finger, it is salary. Second one, which is house property. The biggest one is a head, which is that head PGBP. After that also, the next which comes to you is the head, which is that head? It is the head capital gains. Quite a significant head. Why it is a significant head, students? Because this is a significant head. Not because that it is a vast particular, unlike in the case of PGBP, which is quite vast. This is not a vast head. But here the stakes are very high. What happens under the head capital gains? What happens under the head capital gains? The stake under this head, stakes under this head is really very high. So when I say that the stakes under this particular head is really very high, therefore in that case what does it imply? It implies this, that students, that in this context like the valuation which is done in this particular head would be on a very higher side, because it involves the capital asset, and that is the reason why the valuation becomes on a very higher side. And because the valuation becomes on a very higher side, therefore this is the head wherein the stakes are involved. Huge stakes are involved in fact. And therefore primarily whenever here the competition does not poses much of challenge. Here the competition, why competition does not poses much of challenge? Because you know the format also of the competition. Competition under the head capital gains, full value of consideration, less expenses on transfer, less thereafter the cost of acquisition, cost of improvement. And this is the unique head where you are getting what? The indexation. I told you when I was telling you about salary you don't have any the inflation factor on the exemption which are granted to few of the allowances, which in today's time is outdated. That number 100 rupees per month per child, maximum up to 2. The child numbering is fine up to 2. But the number which they have given for the exemption 100 rupees per month, that is ridiculous. But the same inflation factor you will find, students, the same inflation factor you will find under which head? You will find it under the head capital gains. The cost of acquisition will be revised to what? Revised to ICOA. The cost of improvement will be revised to ICOI. So that is what it would be. And again, since the inflation factor is already has been specified clearly, distinctively, so again computation in the head in the head capital gains does not possess much of challenge. It's quite specific in nature. But as I told you, because of the high stake which is involved, please pay attention now, because of the high stake that is involved, your client will come to you and will ask you what? Is there any way out wherein I can reduce my tax burden arising from the capital gains transaction? That is what the clients will pitch in to you. That whatever is the capital gains on the transfer of the capital asset which has accrued to me, is there any way out? Is there any way out for me to reduce my tax burden? So once you will have to look into this, the question that comes in your mind, now please pay attention, the question that will be there in your mind is about how do we try to do a tax planning. Now in that regard, my first point which I'm giving it to you, when you have to think for doing a tax planning under the head capital gains, you will not even think of any other head, not even chapter 6A. You will not look into chapter 6A when you have to do any sort of tax planning for the head capital gains. Why is it so, students? Let me ask you this question. Why is it so you will not even look into chapter 6A when you have to do a tax planning under the head capital gains? Quickly give me the answer, students. All of you. All the G Drive batch students, Pen Drive batch students, you will also try to get the answer in your mind. Why is it that when there is a tax planning that has to be looked into the capital gains, you will never ever focus or look into chapter 6A? You will never look into chapter 6A. Why you do that? Why you are not supposed to look into chapter 6A for addressing the tax planning under the head capital gains? Quickly. Give me the answer. Type the answer quickly. And all the Pen Drive, G Drive students, get your answer ready. And then let's see what you have got it. Fast. So Harish has also made an attempt. Naveen. Navneet. So yes, indeed, chapter 6A specifically prohibits taking the deduction from the income under the head capital gains. So you will find suddenly a restriction that you don't get chapter 6A deduction in respect of the income which is charged under the head capital gains. That is something that we will also look into it when we come down towards this side of a combination. Be very careful there. And one thing which is there, students, the head capital gains, just pay attention to this point. The head capital gains, in fact, this head is a very closed head. It does not do any sort of interaction with the other heads as well. Like for example, if I have got a loss under the head capital gains, like long-term capital loss, so that LTCL can be set off only against LTCG. That is one. Even a short-term capital loss, if you have got it, then that short-term capital loss you can set it off against the short-term capital gains, or it can be set off against the long-term capital gains. It cannot be set off against the income of the other heads. The short-term capital loss cannot be set off against the income of the other heads. So it is quite like ring-fenced. Ring-fenced means it is like encircled. It does not have the mobility to move to the other heads, or as I told you, to go to chapter 6A. That's the reason why whenever you have to look into the tax planning, as I told you, because the stakes will be very high. The kind of the capital gains that will arise, or even the loss that will arise, the stakes in terms of the valuation would be very high. So if the client approaches you that I want some sort of a remedy for the doing a tax planning on the huge long-term capital gains that has emerged on the transfer of this particular capital asset, then in that case you have to necessarily look into the head capital gains only. And there are two particular aspects that you will then consider, and these are the two aspects which is the most important aspect as far as the head capital gain is concerned. As I told you, again I am repeating this, the head capital gains does not have such sort of a controversy so far as the competition is concerned, because the entire competition is standardized. Full value of consideration, less expenses on transfer, net sale consideration, cost of acquisition, cost of improvement, and thereafter the inflation. And in many cases the cost of acquisitions are also defined. So the competition does not possess that threat or the challenge. So therefore, where exactly is the premium so far as the head capital gain is concerned? The premium lies in the tax planning. And as I told you, there are two sort of tax planning, students, that can be done so far as this two head is concerned. Number one is the 54 series deduction. The 54 series deduction that you will look into it. And also the second sort of tax planning that one will try to exhaust that option, and that option is the option of section 47. You'll say, sir, what is it 47? When you speak section, we don't remember anything. You have to explain us what is section 47. So students, if you remember, section 47 is talking about the transaction which is not considered as a taxable transfer. The transaction which is not considered as what? As a taxable transfer. That is what section 47 is all about. Now, as far as that section 47 is concerned, which is the transaction not a taxable transfer, in that particular context, students, in that particular context, what is the point that is there? You will find in IPCC, if you remember, students, in IPCC you have done like father to son, and then in that case father was not charged to capital gains. That was in respect of the gift, will, inheritance, succession, isn't it? All those factors. In final CA, students, we will have to take it towards the advanced level, whereby like all the business restructuring combinations which are there, that has to be exhausted. That is one part of 47, like amalgamation, demerger, succession from a firm into a company, conversion of a company into LLP, all these other restructuring measures. This is what we have to expertise ourselves in final CA. Because in all these cases, you will find that there is no chargeability of the capital gains provided certain conditions are being satisfied. Provided what? Certain conditions are being satisfied. So therefore, that's what I said to you. You have to do a tax planning. So you have to exhaust your option of section 47. See very carefully whether is there any room or relief which can be obtained through the tax planning measure as far as this section 47 is concerned. Also, apart from business restructuring, students, apart from business restructuring, we will also focus in section 47 certain exemption which are available only to the non-resident. Certain exemption which is available only to whom? Only to a non-resident. So the NR taxation will come into play. There are certain bonds which one non-resident, when they transfer to another non-resident outside India, then no capital gains arises. So we will look 47 now very carefully while we do the head capital gains. So the focus majorly when we do 47, apart from your IPCC stuff that you have learned, we will also now lay heavy emphasis on the business restructuring combination, which fetches you the exemption under section 47, and the second one happens to be the non-resident transactions on a specific cases which is not considered as a taxable transfer. That is what we are going to look into it so far as section 47 is concerned. So what I told you, this head capital gains is a critical head because here the stakes are very high, and the bent of mind that you should have in addressing this particular head is how do I save, apart from the valuation part, the valuation aspect, which is important for computation. What you have to have the bent of mind, how do I minimize my capital gains tax liability arising on the transfer of a capital asset? How do I minimize my capital gains tax liability? This is the bent of mind which is required. And the reason and the logic behind the same, I've already told you, here the stakes are very high. So the computation mechanism or the process is quite less, not that large. The biggest computational head is the head which is the head PGBP, biggest of the head, because of the umpteen deductions, umpteen allowances which are given to you as a deduction, no restrictions. And that is the reason why this becomes the biggest of the head. And the last head, as the finger goes, the last one is the IFOS, which primarily in any case is for the specific purpose, specific reason. You should always keep on coming to IFOS head for many reasons. Gift tax is also one of the very critical aspect. So when we look from the gift tax angle, IFOS will become one of the critical head, so on and so forth. There are other things also which I'm not going to discuss it right now. So this is the 5 head. So therefore each heads of income primarily has a unique mode of computation of this particular head income under the respective head, each heads of income. And therefore if you don't classify your qualified income in the correct head, then that will result into a wrong computation and finally a wrong total income. That will result into what? A wrong computation in that head, and finally a wrong total income, and eventually a wrong tax liability. And once you pay a wrong tax liability, this is what the assessing officer is going to pick up your case for scrutiny. And what would be the reason that he is going to give? Why is he picking up your case for scrutiny? The reason that he is going to give for picking up the case for scrutiny would be, what reason? That look, you have classified, say for example, the income should have been classified under the head house property and you have classified under the head PGBP. What would have happened? Had it been classified under the head house property, then only a standard deduction available. But the fact that you have classified the income under the head house PGBP, you have taken a full deduction of all the expenditures. And that will result into a wrong computation of total income and eventually a wrong payment of tax liability, and finally what? Finally the litigation will arise. So the first and the most important aspect in the computation of the total income happens to be the classification. Classification, students, therefore, of income. In the bracket, students, if write this qualifying income, keep reminding yourself that this computation that you are doing, which involves these two steps, are in respect of the qualified income. Keep always reminding yourself this particular point. This is so critical. So classification of income, which, as I told you, we will write qualifying income into the appropriate head. And the next step is about what? Step 2, students. Herein, computation of the qualified income so classified in the appropriate head as per the rules of the competition in that head. Computation of the qualified income so classified in the appropriate heads as per the rules of the computation in that head. As per the rules of the computation in that head. So these are the two steps on the basis of which the computation will be done. Now, why this is irrelevant herein? Just take a note of this one. Since each heads of income has a distinct mode of computation, comma, a correct classification is necessary for the purpose of a correct computation of the total income. A correct classification is necessary for the purpose of a correct computation of the total income. Fine, students. So, therefore, students, herein, in fact, students, many of the case laws, as I told you, here you will find majorly the case laws also. And this is where, in fact, you will learn a lot of case laws. Because, why the case laws? Because of the controversy. Why the controversy? Because of this kind of a distinct treatment of the computation of each and every head. Whereas SSC feels that this income will be classified in this particular head, department feels otherwise. And the stage of error is on the classification level. Students, when you have to learn, this is where students, this is precisely how See, direct tax law is really one of the best subject, and it is such like highly enriching and very much like when you talk about, you feel so enlightened, but provided you understand it in a correct perspective. When you read the case laws and all, students, you should focus now upon like what, like herein in this context, where would be the kind of a litigation that will arise. Let's see here in students where the litigation will arise. Let's have a look. One is on the income front. So see, there would be a case wherein the dispute will arise whether this can be considered as an income or not, for which we have already laid down the test. What was the test? The test was that the income should arise from an amount which is a definite source. Income should arise from a definite source. That is what will result into an income. As far as the capital receipt is concerned, we don't have any issue on that. Why? Because it is defined already as an income. So there will not be any dispute on the taxability of the capital receipt. But yes, apart from that, other particular income which has not been defined, on what basis it will be taxed? It will be taxed on the basis of whether it is arising from a definite source or not. And that is what will result into some sort of litigation. Although by now in 2020, up till 2020, the matter is already settled. Which income will be taxed and which is not to be taxed, this is so far as more or less settled. But still, sometime in between you will find what the case laws are popping up, whether this can be considered as an income which is chargeable to tax under the Act. Fair enough. So we will discuss as and when the such situation will arise. There are a couple of case law which are factored in for the income part also. Second is about the litigation. The second area of litigation would be in respect of what? So the second area of litigation would be in respect of that income which is referred in section 5. And for that reason you require what? You require the scope of the total income which is chargeable to tax under the Act. Here, students, as far as the resident is concerned, there is no dispute. Why? Because it's a world income which is taxable. But when it comes to a non-resident, then we all know there are two incomes only which is chargeable to tax under the Act, and they are income which is accrued or deemed to have accrued or rise in India, and the second one is income which is received in India. So the entire litigation therefore would be when an income can be considered to be an income which is deemed to accrue or rise in India. In fact, the Vodafone case which I was discussing with you, that 12,000 crore tax dispute was on the basis of this particular part. Whether this can be considered as an income which is an income which is deemed to accrue or rise in India. This is exactly where the entire litigation happened. So this is the kind of a litigation. So you should always be clever now to understand on what side the litigation is happening. So whether the amount is an income or not, that is one possible litigation, and for which you may have to end up doing some case laws. If the amount is an income, whether it falls within the scope of the chargeability under the Act, for which purpose resident, we will not have any discussion at all. World income is taxable. It is the non-resident where that aspect as to what constitute an income which is deemed to accrue as in India, this will be the reason of the further controversy, and for which you will have to end up doing a case law. So mentally, you should, before you do this, you should channelize your mind in that way, so that once it comes to you, you should first try to see in which compartment of the discussion it will be entering into. The case law will enter into which compartment of your understanding of this particular law, whether it is the discussion is on the income, or so that if you can understand that, you can easily, or you can really have a very refined answer given in your examination also. Because case law is what? At the end of the day, you have to understand the case law, but the direction of your answer is the much of the substance. Students only do the case law like this. What is the approach of students? You can ask those who are right now appearing in this particular attempt or so. They will find that they read the list of the case laws, entire list. They will read it primarily, and what is written inside therein. There is no such side of segmenting of the case law, that okay, this goes in this goes in that, and what is income, first understanding the law and then approaching the case law. This approach is missing. Why it is missing? Because they directly jump into the case law without understanding as to what part of the law that the case law has to be considered. And what is the basic principle of that law, which we should always keep in mind before we enter into this discussion? So these are the basic principles that we are discussing right now, so as to appreciate the fine nuances of the case laws. Once the qualified income is over, other litigation would be on the competition. In the competition part, there are two segments. What are the two segments in the competition? I have already have told you. Two steps are there. One step is about what? One, that competition you will do only in respect of the qualified income. And how the competition will be done in two steps. First step is about classifying into the appropriate head. This is what will also give rise to your litigation, and that is what something which I am going to do in my next segment. So there also the first thing that we are going to discuss will be the case laws, which you need to know as to where the litigation arises. Arises for what? Arises for knowing which is the appropriate head wherein the chargeability would be attracted. Why the litigation arises? Because all the heads are not, all the heads are unique as compared to the other heads of income. The mode of competition is unique as compared to the other heads of income, and that is the reason why this classification give rise to controversy litigations, and hence be prepared to deal with the case laws. Once the classification is over, then you come to the competition part. And as I told you, students, and as I told you, in the competition, whether the head salary or whether the head house property, in the competition segment, will it pose any case laws in that? And the answer is no. Hardly there would be any case laws. At least from academic perspective, you don't have to remember any case laws. Hardly, otherwise there is very less case laws. And for academic perspective, there is no case law that you need to learn in the competition part. Why is it so? The reason is also known to you all by now. But when it comes to PGBP, in that the competition will be a critical factor. Why? Because there is any expenditure or allowance can qualify for deduction provided the conditions are fulfilled. So the assessee argument will be that, look, I have fulfilled the condition of the respective section. Department challenge would be a counter challenge. No, you have violated the condition for the purpose of deduction, and hence the disallowances. So one of the major area of your analysis in the head PGBP for the case law perspective would be on the competition part. And that exactly, students, how you have to balance your approach. And this is where you need to head across one by one, step by step, brick by brick. Did you all got this one, students? Fine. So this is where now we are. I hope that all of you have copied down this particular part, all of you in this regard. And here in, students, just now you can just give the header and just you can wrap it up at this stage. Primarily herein just write principles, PLE, not PAL, not your boss. Principles of classification. This is what we are going to learn in our next segment. Principles of classification. This is what, students, now we are going to learn in our next segment. The part B. Fine, students. Now, how do we classify? Is there any principles or the test on the basis of which we can classify the income? Yes, there are. How do we do that? That is what we are going to learn in this particular segment. Now, students, I'll just tell you one thing, that now the books are due for dispatch. The first booklet, which will be there in a couple of days or so, the books will be dispatched herein. I told you that this will do this particular lecture. 4 class would be there, which we'll be putting up in the YouTube. So this week we will try to do it in bits and in parts, like all the days remaining the same, but I'll do like part A and part B separately, because the books will start reaching to you by the end of this week or so. Anyways, in whatever be the situation, I will, by end of the week, I will also give to all the students the first PDF, the PDF of the first topic. By then the books should be there reaching to all of you to the respective locations. But I will also give you the PDF of the first topic, which would be done, which we are going to discuss, so that if at all you will, if the books are about to reach, at least the sessions are not been disrupted. One, and second, and more importantly, students, is that don't worry, I will be making you comfortable through the slides and all, which has been there. So you don't worry that if the books are in transit, it's still to be reached. Don't worry, you will still be at ease. That is my responsibility. Fine. So this is what we have done so far. You will keep on revising this one, and then now I'll see you on our next particular session, which would be on Tuesday. So 3B will be done in the next particular segment on Tuesday, and at that point of time we'll start off with the principle of classifications. Okay, how do we classify the income? What are the tests of classification in the income? Once that particular part is done, then we will hit onto the heads of income. Heads of income, students. And as I told you, once the classification, the test of classification is done, the heads of income is what we are going to hit upon. Which heads of income we are going to start off with? First one, as I've already announced, my first head of income that we are going to analyze would be the massive and the biggest of the lot, which is PGBP. Okay, and you yourself will realize the way you have learned PGBP, or even many final CA students also, the way they have learned PGBP and the way we are going to address will be a completely different perspective. Okay, that we'll do as and when it will come. Anyway, students, see you then Tuesday. Okay, evening. Now Tuesday, students, evening timing that we are going to start off would be at 6:30. So we start at 6:30 in the evening on Tuesday. So Tuesday evening 6:30 to 9 o'clock. Well, 3B is what I am going to complete. I will just go with 3B completion, whereby principle of classification is what I will try to wrap up in my next particular segment in 3B. Okay, because in any case these lectures are getting also uploaded in YouTube, so that is the reason why I'll just do that completion of one particular segment of principle of classification. See you then.